Welcome back, everyone. So I'm actually recording this intro as a second attempt at an intro, long after recording most of the video that you're about to watch. The reason I felt I needed to come back and do this was because, well, if you followed my build so far, you already know where I'm up to. You'll know that I'm trying to finish a guitar body in epoxy for the first time. If you're just finding this video for the first time, firstly, welcome. This video was intended to be structured to show you how I've gone from start to finish in coating a guitar body on the front and the back in epoxy and getting it up to a nice finish. Now, that is ultimately what we do through this video, but it's just to forewarn you that, spoiler alert, I don't get it right first time. So if you are trying to learn something from this, please do watch to the end. Please bear with me if the edit becomes a little bit disjointed, because this actually has taken me a period of weeks, during which time I've had coronavirus, I've changed jobs, all kinds of things, which have kind of got in the way. So forgive me if the edit's a little bit here and there. But ultimately, I do think if you stick with me, you will learn something along the way. So, back to my original intro. So if you've been following along at home, last time you watched me go through the painstaking process of dyeing, rubbing back, and then applying a rather unusual top coat of z-poxy finishing epoxy over the top of my guitar. And the process went okay, at least I think it went okay. And the next step really is to sand back that epoxy top coat and see if we can get it to a point that's ready for buffing without sanding through the finish. Now, what I'm not going to be doing is making you sit and watch me for half an hour just sanding and sanding and sanding and sanding, because that would be boring. But what I do want to do is take you through the process, just highlighting what grits I'm using, and we'll see if we make any mistakes along the way. If it all goes fine and hunky-dory, we will maybe just have a nice short video today, or maybe we'll do a little bit on the neck. If it doesn't go very well, then we could be in for a world of hurt, where we have to start sanding back, refinishing, or at least applying some more coats of epoxy and letting those dry. Hopefully it won't come to that. So we do have quite a challenge. The epoxy, the good thing about it is you can just kind of brush it on, but the bad thing is no matter how you put it on, it really does seem to give an uneven finish. It's quite rippled. There's a lot of sort of texture in the surface. I'm hoping that it's thick enough that we can fairly comfortably sand through all of that and still have a nice glossy coat left underneath. Hopefully anyway. So you can see that texture just reflecting in the light there, hopefully. I'm now going to attack it with this 320 very gently and just see if it seems to make an impression. Circular motions. So hopefully you can see what I'm going for. We're only starting to scratch the surface, quite literally, with that sandpaper there now. I'm just trying to gently work away at it until all of this kind of, I would call it almost like a leopard print kind of texture, is gone. We're trying to do that without accidentally sanding through any thinner areas. Because we're dealing with epoxy here and it's quite fine dust, I'm going to stop talking and put my dust mask on. I'm also not going to make you watch me do the whole guitar. I think you get the idea. So I'm going to spend a good hour or so going over the whole guitar with this, and I'll see you on the other side. Right, so as I thought, it's all gone wrong pretty quickly. As I mentioned, I've got this kind of textured surface, which I really was trying to get rid of with the 320. And it seems in areas where I've been trying to do that, once I get down to the stage where there's a little bit of that texture left, I have managed to sand through, here being the worst of it. In fact, if I put a little bit of alcohol on, it might help you see a little bit better. So hopefully you can see there's some areas where I've definitely gone through. Interestingly, there's areas where I don't think I have gone through, but the black seems to be coming off, which really seems to suggest that original black coat that I put on, despite smothering it in sealer, it's not been properly adhered to the wood, and it's probably seeped into the epoxy a little bit. I thought that might have been the case when I was examining the epoxy, because the epoxy just seemed a little bit dark and cloudy, very subtly. So yeah, it's not gone that well on the first attempt, and I really didn't think it was going to be honest, but not to worry. We could, if we wanted to, we could try and spot stain those dark areas, but given how patchy the black is seeming, I think if I was going to try and even that out, we would end up with something not at all like what I was wanting. So I am going to sand the top back, and we're going to have another go at it. It's frustrating because it's a lot of work, but I did expect it to happen on the first outing, I have to be honest with you. I'm just going to try and take as much advice as I possibly can from people who've done this before and have another go. That's all we can do, really. What I am probably going to do is treat myself to some new sanding discs for the random orbital sander to try and get this lot off as quickly as possible before we have another go. Alrighty, so that's had a good going over with 80 grit. As you can tell, there's still some colour left in there. If I was going to refinish in a different colour, I would obviously want to keep going until all of that was gone. That is why when you're refinishing a guitar, you often have to take a good couple of mil off the top. Thankfully, as I'm effectively applying the same colour over the top, and I want some little subtle hints and shades in here and there, that's not too important to me. So I'm going to swap out my 80 grit disc for a 120 grit disc, and we'll give it another going over with the random orbital. So at this stage it should be ready for going over with 240 grit, ready to stain again. Before I do that though, my sound holes are looking a little bit shabby, so I'm going to use some sanding implements to just tidy them up a bit, which means I will need to epoxy them again, but that's the least of my worries at the moment. Right, so you've seen me do this once before. We're going to be applying Neat Angelus Purple Leather Dye as a base coat, rubbing that back and then applying the black. It stands to be a little bit more colourful this time because someone has ran off with my rubber gloves, so I'm probably going to get absolutely covered. But we'll try our best not to. Gonna let that dry for a little bit, and then of course sand it back. Okay, now that's dry, I'm going to take it back with some 240 grit. I'm actually going to try using the random orbital for this bit. Hopefully it should go okay. Few bits to finish up there by hand, but looking good so far. That's sped things up a bit. once again, the purple's been half rubbed back, and we're going to apply some black over the top. The black is also Angelus jet black dye, but it is being diluted down about, well, I wouldn't like to say, probably about 50-50 with alcohol. So that top is now looking really nice. The satin effect of having the sealer on it actually complements it quite well. It's had a good sort of 3 or 4 coats of sealer now. I can't realistically put any more on. So hopefully it has sealed it fairly well. We've had the epoxy bathing in a warm bath this time as opposed to sitting it in front of the heater like I did last time. And I'm hoping that it's going to be a little bit thinner and it might dry a little flatter. The only problem with that is it's probably going to run a little bit more as well. I need to stick some gloves on and we're just going to go for it. I probably do have some people screaming at the screen right now. Just use some aerosol on there, like some nice satin nitro, and to be honest that probably would provide a lovely finish, but I feel I really wanted to use this guitar to experiment with epoxy, and if I shy away from that now, I'm never going to come back to epoxy again for this kind of guitar. So I want to give it a fair shot, see if we really can get a good finish with it or not. If not, well, it's not the end of the world. I'm liking the clarity of that, I really am. There are tones of blue and purple sort of coming through the black, and we can kind of see that reflected through the finish, whereas before I think it went a bit cloudy and I think there was too much excess dye on there unsealed. So again you can see that's a fairly uneven finish, but it's what we expect. So yeah, we're going to leave that 24 hours, we're going to come back, we're going to check all the binding areas and everything, see if anything needs touched up, sanded back, anything like that, and then we're going to build up a good further 4 or 5 coats at least on top of that, so that I can afford myself plenty of room for sanding back. I will probably take it home with me and stick it in a nice warm house, just because it's about 10 degrees in here, which is a bit too cold really for proper curing. So yeah, see you on the other side. Alright, so we're back the following day, and the good news is that dye job is definitely way better than my first attempt, and I really like it, which just makes me want to not mess it up all the more. As I already mentioned, we've got bubbles in the epoxy, which now I think about it, I did experience that on the back of the guitar. When I applied that first coat, I had to use it as a sealing coat and then sand it all back. I'm going to attempt to do the same with this. We've definitely got some problem areas. Here is definitely the worst. I don't know whether I've sort of cooked it or there's just been a load of air trapped or it's just kind of gone off just as the air is coming out of it. But we're going to have to try and sand this back pretty much all the way to the finish, which considering I've already, back to the staining rather, which considering I've already gone through the staining once when I had about 3 coats of epoxy on here, it does make me rather nervous, but I'm just going to go for it. I did say that I want to persevere with the epoxy. I really want to make the epoxy work, even if I decide never to use it again. I really want to see it through. I have made the decision though that I will give myself a maximum of 3 attempts at this with the epoxy, and if it doesn't work, we will switch to something more traditional like a nitro lacquer. That's not just for my own sanity, it's mainly because if I keep sanding and sanding, this top's going to get thinner and thinner to the point where there's no top left. There's plenty of chunk left in it yet, but I can't go on doing that forever. So I'm going to bust out the podcasts, set about this, probably with 320, but I'm going to go ever so gentle. I could take all of this epoxy off probably in about 15 minutes, especially if I use the orbital sander, but rather than doing that, I'm going to be very careful, take a good hour or so, just very gently sanding away at it, and we're going to just get back to that point where we're just kissing the finish. I will keep saying the finish, when we're just kissing the dye on the top of the guitar and see what we're left with. Alright, so that's had a good going over with 320. I've actually managed to completely eliminate the flat spots in some areas, more so on this bottom area where I've worked on it more. You can see there's some areas where I've just started to go through and actually hit the dye, but it is not as severe as it was on my first attempt. On my first attempt, we got right through to the point where we had like white wood, whereas this is just looking ever so slightly lighter. That would look better with a finish over it, but it's still not ideal. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to come in with a very diluted black wash and just see if I can darken that up a little bit, just to make it blend in and be a little bit less conspicuous. Right, so I think that's best we're going to do. I'm going to give that some proper drying time, and then now that most of this is sealed, I'm going to do one final inspection around the outer faux binding and the sound holes to see if any sanding needs to take place before we go ahead and apply several coats of epoxy. I suspect, based off that dye job I just did there, I'm probably going to have to tidy up the sound holes a little bit first, but that was what I planned anyway, so bear with me. Okay, so I'm actually really glad I've done that. I think the binding at the moment and even the sound holes are looking the best they've ever been in terms of cleanup. Yes, the finish I have managed to sand through slightly in some places, and I can definitely tell that. I'm hoping that once I apply this top layer of epoxy, you shouldn't really be able to notice unless you're looking for it. A lot of the problems I had before were caused by the heat gun. That leaves me with a bit of a dilemma, because I don't really know whether that air was coming out of the epoxy itself or out of the wood. I think it was more trapped in the fibres of the wood, because I've had the same problem on the back. The first coat that I did ended up with a lot of bubbles in it. The second coat, not so much. I've this time decided to go for a bit of a hybrid of techniques on what I've done previously. I'm warming the epoxy in a bath of warm water first, and I'm also going to put the shop heater on my work so that the work itself is warm and that the thing is being blasted with hot air as it's drying anyway, but I'm not going to use the heat gun. So because I'm going to put the shop heater on, it is noisy, therefore you won't be able to hear me, so let's just crack on and do it. So there we go. I didn't want you to have to watch me apply 5 coats of epoxy, but we now have about 5 coats of epoxy on the top there. I've also applied a couple on the back, on top of what was already on there, which we'll talk about 5 coats as well. I've drawn some conclusions about this z-poxy finishing resin that I'm using. I think while it still would be very good for flat acoustic guitar tops where you're scraping it on really thin on a flat surface, I don't think it's really suited for a carved top like this. I still hold out hope that I think other formulations would still work. For example, I was using the fast set stuff. I think the stuff that has like a 24-hour cure time probably would be a lot more suited, because that's going to allow the self-leveling and the bubbles and everything to escape a lot better. Or similarly, you could still probably use a faster setting epoxy that is just a little thinner to start with. But you know, I'm hoping that I'm still going to be able to get a decent finish with what I've got here. Now, the plan is, this is attempt number 2. I'm actually going to start on the back, and despite sanding through the first time, we're going to be brave, and we're actually going to use the random orbital sander on this flat surface, applying pretty much no pressure, because if I sit here with a sanding block trying to do this by hand, it's going to take a very long time. So here we go. Dust mask on. We're starting on a 180 grit pad, just because I want to try and skim off any big bumps or anything in the guitar back. Probably won't do that for too long. Then we'll just go up the grits. As we go up the grits, we might switch to hand. Let's see how it goes. Well guys, the top and the sides I've actually been at for probably a good couple of hours now. I switched to hand sanding. The back has been sanded back to about 400 grit. The sides I've still been going around in the region about 240, 320, trying to get everything smooth. Trying to get little drops and imperfections or like dribbles, if you like, where the epoxies ran. That's the word I was looking for. Getting those out by hand is really difficult and time consuming. Don't like it. The feel of the wood sanded back to this kind of matte 400 grit-ish is absolutely lovely. In terms of the actual tactile feel of the guitar, that's actually fantastic. But there are areas where you can see I have gone very thin and actually gone through slightly as I predicted. They're sort of on the transitions from the flat areas to the curved areas. And that's probably just me being careless with the random orbital, to be fair. But there is hope in this yet. I think if I wanted to, I could actually just use that as a sealing coat and come and put something else on top. But I think I will persevere with the sanding. I'm going to get everything lovely and smooth on the sides and the back. And then I will come along using that credit card method I talked about and just scrape an ultra thin layer of epoxy over the areas where I've gone through and sort of try and sand those back. We'll just keep persevering until the back and the sides are in more of a, well, more or less a ready for buffing finish. Then we'll turn our attention to the top, which I will almost undoubtedly end up sanding through the stain again. If that happens, I think we'll take a different tack with it, but come on, we'll get there in the end. So, quick update. The back and the sides are more or less done. I still need to patch up the epoxy where I sanded through, but the sides are otherwise how I want them. I've made a good start on the top. I actually initially attacked the top with the random orbital sander, which was a little bit scary, going in there with about 320, then 400. I've then switched to hand sanding, and for the most part it's going very, very well. There's nowhere that I've gone through yet, which is surprising to me. The real scary bit, which I don't know if you'll be able to see on camera, is that if the light catches it, you can just see these little low pit marks that are just part of that epoxy finish, how it went on. And I've just got to keep sanding and sanding and sanding till I get to those. I'm doing that with 320 by hand. I'm just trying to be really careful, but being really careful, of course, takes lots of time. And we are getting there. There's a lot of them gone now, but there's still just some persistent ones that I just need to keep going for until they disappear. Wish me luck. Alrighty, so I've been working on that for a few more hours, mainly with 320, and then I've just given it a very rough sand up, actually probably to about 5,000 grit, although that's certainly not to a high standard. If I look really close, there's still some scratches in there, so I'm probably going to have to at least go back to about 800 grit and really put some more work into that. But it's at a point where I feel comfortable and confident with it that if I was to progress with this, get the neck glued in, all that kind of thing, when we come back to wet sand it or whatever once more, I know that I'm probably not going to do anything horrible that's going to require refinishing. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it looks like a good first attempt. I am going to have to come in and once again tidy up these sound holes. I could do that either by sanding them back or sanding and rounding them over slightly, or I could paint them. Plenty of options there. But no, it's definitely all heading in the right direction. I will just give you a little look at what it does look like wet. Because it'll be looking pretty matte to you there on camera at the moment. But if it was going to be buffed up as it was now, then it would look something along these lines, which is nice. I particularly like the flaming around the horn here. I don't know if you can see. It's a really nice piece of wood actually. The colour's a little bit patchy on the top here, and there are areas, as I say, around the sound holes where I've come a little bit too close to sanding through once again, but thankfully they're in areas where I can make that a feature, as they say. So that's the top where it needs to be for now. we need to turn our attention back to the back, which has some areas where I did sand through a little bit. So I'm going to get that cleaned up. I'm going to mix up a tiny little bit of epoxy, get that nice and warmed up, and I'm going to scrape it on dead thin onto these little light patches that we see poking through, and hopefully we can sand those back as we have done the top, and then we should have a nice sealed guitar. So you just saw me sand back another coat there, wet sanding included, and I think I'm right in saying that when it came to the end of that coat, I had actually ever so slightly, a lot less than last time, just sanded through still on a few little corners and a few little places. So this has actually had yet another coat of epoxy, which I'm about to sand back. But it's probably difficult to tell on camera, but the sides, the back, everywhere really is just looking a lot better. That is sort of the good thing about epoxy. Even though it's quite hard to work with on these curved surfaces, it does mean that if I just mess up in one little area, I can effectively patch it and sand it back again. And as long as there's no sanded off pigment like there is on the front, then I can effectively just keep trying, and it means that areas where I have made errors are getting smaller and smaller, and the thing's getting just better as I learn, as well as I just get better at the whole sanding process. So I'm going to crack on and sand this once again. Hopefully I will not sand through this time, because I'm getting a bit sick of keep patching and then sanding some more. But I'm just going to really take my time, and hopefully we'll end up with something good. If I do keep having to repeat that process of kind of patching and sanding, I'm not going to film all of it. I'll just sort of update you when I get to the point of the kind of final wet sand, and we'll go from there. So you join me now, just getting down into the order of 5 and 10,000 grit. We've been all the way through 800, 1200. I think did I do 1500? Yeah, I did 1500, then 3000, then 5000, 7,000, and now 10,000, which is actually quite hard to find. Just a small little note that when you get into the higher grits, like the really high grits, they become so fine that the film of water that is produced with wet sanding is actually enough to keep the abrasive from pretty much touching. If you have a large flat surface like this and you just rub it like this, you're just effectively skating around on a film of water. So you've really actually got to, at that stage, start applying a little bit of pressure with your thumb or a few fingers, and you will feel the difference. It'll just feel slightly more friction, but also you'll just feel it. You'll feel it. So this is definitely the best run I've had so far in terms of not sanding through or anything like that. Although to be honest, I think I might have slightly still on the back. So I'm gonna have to get this cleaned off and see what it actually looks like. So stand by. Alrighty, so I mean things are going better. I've lost count of the amount of times now I've had to sort of patch things up and then sand them back again. You know, the top getting to the point where, great, I've managed to sort of sand that back all the way to about sort of 10,000 grit, and I haven't sanded through the finish, and that's great. And I'm sure it's not without imperfections, but it is effectively ready to buff, which is great. I have actually already given it a very brief going over with some automotive cutting compound. It still probably could do with a bit more elbow grease in it, and probably then going over with another finer compound, but you know, it's getting there. It's definitely getting there. I know I'm not going to have to put any more epoxy on that top, which is great. The sides are looking a lot better than they were. I'm sure if you catch them in the right light, you know, if you excuse the crack that appeared in the original construction, which unfortunately I just can't hide, you know, the sides are looking pretty good, but then we start to see yet again a little place where that finish has been sanded through. And if we look at the back, again, the back is starting to look lovely and glassy and all that kind of thing, but there's just these little patches where, although they feel really smooth, I can't detect the difference there when I run my finger over them. I've sanded through, and it just takes that glossiness away, and I really am loath to have to keep putting on more and more coats of epoxy. I'm almost tempted to see if a bit of wax or oil or something like that, if I actually build it up into a nice high gloss, whether it would mask that. Because at the end of the day, this is not a guitar I'm going to sell to anyone. And I'm getting a bit frustrated with just having to keep applying epoxy and then sanding it back. I don't know if you'll be able to tell, it'll depend how the light hits it there, but when you look at it dead on, it looks fine. But once you tilt it into the light, you can see those areas where there's just, well, the bits where I've sanded through. And I mean, they feel perfectly fine, they feel perfectly smooth, but it's infuriating. And as it stands, I'm a little bit undecided in that I know damn well if I persevere, if I was to take a bit of alcohol to that, clear any oil off it and put another coat of epoxy on, I will get there eventually. I will manage to get it all covered without sanding through. But I don't want to keep doing this over and over and over again in this video, because I think you've got the point by now. I'm actually undecided whether I will invest the time in doing it or not, because I really want to get this finished, and ultimately it's a guitar to go on the wall. That's what it's going to end up being, and it's on the back. It's not to sell to someone. And if it really bothers me that much, the beauty of it being epoxy is I can come along later and put some more on. In fact, the thought just occurs to me there that I could probably put a self-leveling epoxy on, and it would probably give me a little bit easier time as well. But no, let's talk about how this little experiment's actually gone then. So let me just remind people, in case you don't know, this is the first guitar I've ever built. It's the first guitar I've ever finished. It's maybe not the first wood I've ever finished, but it's definitely up there. If anyone's looking to make their first guitar, I can tell you from what I've just done, epoxy is not the easiest thing to finish with, certainly on a curved surface. I don't want to completely say don't use epoxy on guitars. It has some very valid uses in stabilization. If you're doing fancy things like fabric tops or stabilizing bells and things like that. I mean, that's why I actually wanted to use epoxy on this guitar in the first place. It's not because I thought it would be the best finish to use, but it's because my neck, being made out of palm wood, I thought may require some sort of stabilization. And not having the option of putting it in a chamber with cactus juice or something like that, I think applying a layer of epoxy grain filler, possibly diluted down with some alcohol, will probably be the best way to go for that. And it was just because I knew I was going to be doing the neck in epoxy, I thought, well, I might as well give it a go on the body as well. And as you can see, that's had mixed results. What it definitely has been good for, without a doubt, is it's been an excellent grain filler on the wenge or the wenge. I mean, if I sanded all that back actually to bare wood and just finished it in oil, it would look fantastic. It was only because I wanted to try and persevere and get that high gloss epoxy finish rather than the oil finish that I persisted with it. If I had another piece of wenge that I wanted to fill the grain on, I would use that epoxy again in a heartbeat. And I've definitely seen people use it on flat top things like acoustics or Telecasters and get great results. There just seems to be something about the conditions I'm using it in, the formulation that I'm using, and the fact I'm using it on a curved surface just makes it very hard to work with when it comes to sanding it down. As I say, if I persist with it, I will get it perfect. I haven't decided if I'm going to waste my time doing that or not yet, but we'll see. But yes, it's been an interesting experiment. I really would like to actually get on and get the neck done. And as we go on throughout the course of that, and maybe I have some epoxy made up, I might decide to dab a little bit extra on the guitar body and see if we can do a better job of it. The front of the body is looking pretty good now. It just looks like it's in need of a good buff. I don't know if I showed you or not. I used some fairly abrasive rubbing compound designed for cars. This is Turtle Wax brand. People often use Maguire's just because it's more popular in the USA, I think. If I was following that methodology, I would probably give it another go over with a much finer compound and a buffer. And that will probably be enough to get it up to a nice high gloss shine. But for now, I mean, we've still actually, the really scary thing is we've still actually got to drill bridge posts in here. So, you know, it's took me all this time to get this guitar finished up to a half decent standard, and I could end up ruining the bloody thing, but we'll see. We'll see. So yeah, next time we're definitely going to be working on the neck. Thank you for bearing with me. This one has been a bit of a wrencher in terms of me wanting to keep continuing with it, just because I'm getting so sick of sanding and finishing the thing, but we'll get there. I am considering, it's a bit silly considering I haven't really ever finished one guitar, but I am seriously considering putting myself in for the Great Guitar Build-Off this year, just to really spur me on to try and finish this guitar in about 3 to 4 months instead of 3 to 4 years. Another guitar, I should say. But we'll see. Hopefully the next video shouldn't be too far away. I will catch you all next time.